The question I would like to ask today is, are we going to see President Joe Biden put on trial for 13 years, causing his family to sell almost everything that they own to help provide for his defense, only to see the U.S. government sentence him to prison for 30 years to life for the killing of innocent civilians in Afghanistan? The reason I ask that question is because that's what happened to four of my friends. Here's the headline from the New York Times. The Pentagon acknowledges the August 29th drone strike in Afghanistan was a tragic mistake that killed 10 civilians. I've mentioned before that prior to becoming a police officer, I was in the military. Well, between being in the military and becoming a police officer, I had a few different jobs. One of those jobs was with a company called Blackwater. Blackwater is a company that provided a service to the Department of State in Iraq, where we supplemented the diplomatic security service, doing a job in country that's very similar to what the Secret Service does for the president. So as an employee for Blackwater, I was in Iraq, and I worked motorcade operations for diplomats and dignitaries who needed a safe way to travel the country in order to meet with their Iraqi counterparts and help with the rebuilding efforts. You may have known Iraq was not the safest place for an American to be, so armed security was something that was very important for our dignitaries and diplomats. The government did not have enough full-time agents to do this job, so they called on companies like Blackwater to provide contractors. That's what I did. And that's also what these four men did. These men are Dustin Hurd, Evan Liberty, Nick Slatton, and Paul Slough. Here's the incident that had them put in prison. So on December the 16th, 2007, these men were all working for a quick reaction force known as Raven 2-3. They were called into action on this day because another team, Raven 4, was a regular motorcade team with a dignitary that they were protecting. And at 11:59, Raven 4 called in a V-bid had exploded 24 meters north of their gate. A V-bid is also known as a car bomb. So immediately afterwards, within 1 minute, Raven 22 was sent in response. That's another quick reaction force. At 12:07, Raven 4 and Raven 22 linked up at the venue and began to roll. Raven 23 was sent to lock down Gray 87, which was a code name for Nisour Square. At 12:12, they reported contact and multiple insurgents firing small arms at the convoy. They then requested air support. Eventually, one of their vehicles had been struck so many times that it was disabled, needed to be towed off station, and then they were able to finally return back to the green zone. One thing that happened during this firefight, they had this traffic circle locked down. The reason it was locked down was so that the team who was transporting the dignitary could approach from where they were coming from, hit the traffic circle with no cars in it, and then exit the traffic circle as quickly and safely as possible. So Raven 23 arrived on scene of this traffic circle, locked it down. Shortly thereafter, began taking fire. When the gunfire erupted, a white Kia that had been stopped in traffic lurched forward. The response at the time, especially on this day, because a car bomb had already attacked one convoy, and it was very common for car bombs in Baghdad at that time. I won't go into details, but I've seen some pretty dramatic effects from car bombs. they don't have to get incredibly close to you to do a lot of damage. So when you have all the traffic stopped and a vehicle launches forward while you're taking small arms fire, the men opened fire on that vehicle and killed 2 people. As it would turn out, the 2 people that were in that vehicle were innocent civilians. The guys returned back to base and then turned on the news, and for some reason the news was reporting, and the Iraqi government was telling the news that the men had killed upwards of 20 people, 15 to 20 people. An investigation ensued, and I won't get into all of the details because I don't have that much time today, but basically the military, well, not the military, the government was trying to say that the men of Raven 23, that Dustin Hurd, Evan Liberty, Nick Slatton, and Paul Slough, opened fire, killing innocent civilians that day completely unprovoked. There was a lot of evidence at scene and a lot of photographs and stuff taken that would show an alternate reality, along with the fact that one of their vehicles was struck so many times that it had to be towed off station. These vehicles, let's see if I can get a picture of one here. These weren't regular armored cars. This was from a firefight that happened earlier that year. Okay, so right here, these are the type of vehicles that these guys are driving. These are heavily armored, mine-resistant vehicles. And on September 16, 2007, they took so much fire that one of their vehicles was disabled and had to be towed off station. But these men were put on trial and convicted and sentenced to 30 years eventually, with the government saying that they returned fire or that they opened fire completely unprovoked. The first time that these men were put on trial, the case was dismissed, and here's Joe Biden's reaction to that initial dismissal.
Take this opportunity to express my personal regret for the violence in Nisour involving Blackwater employees in 2007. The United States is determined to hold accountable anyone who commits crimes against the Iraqi people. While we fully respect the independence and integrity of the U.S. judicial system, we were disappointed by the judge's decision to dismiss the indictment, which was based on the way in which some evidence had been acquired. A dismissal, I want to make clear, is not an acquittal. And today, I'm announcing that the United States government will appeal this decision. Our Justice Department will file that appeal from the judge's decision next week.
So, at the time, that was Vice President Biden, and he was absolutely determined to make sure that these men were tried and convicted from what happened on that day. Of the 4 men, the only one I know personally is Dustin Hurd. Dustin and I were hired together. We were in the same training class. We shipped to Iraq the same week. Watching what Dustin had to go through was excruciating. I was friends with his mother on Facebook, and his wife. And he was eventually sent to prison where he spent 6 years before being pardoned by President Trump. During that 6 years, his kids went from being in elementary school to being in high school. They went from being toddlers to being young adults. And he did nothing wrong to deserve that. I want to say right now publicly, I'm sorry I didn't do more. Back to what started all of this. On August 29th, the president ordered a drone strike in Afghanistan that killed 10 innocent civilians. He wasn't taking fire. His vehicle hadn't been shot so many times that it was disabled and had to be towed off station. He wasn't in fear for his life. Is he going to face prison time for his decision? Those are my thoughts for today.